series. My name is Ariel, and I'm one of the founders of Muse, and I'm also an advisory board member for the Center for Aging and Brain Health Innovation. I was trained as a neuroscientist and spent a decade as a psychotherapist, and I'm committed to teaching people ways to improve their lives through their brain and mind. We started this series in order to bring you deeper insights into the brain. We get to work with a remarkable group of neuroscientists and clinicians, both in the process of building Muse and in working with the hundreds of scientists who use Muse in their own research. And we wanted to be able to bring you their cutting-edge knowledge and insights to help you make actionable change in your brain health. So for those of you who are new to Muse, we develop state-of-the-art experiences using EEG technology. Our goal is to help individuals live healthier, happier, more connected lives. And our meditation and sleep tracking headbands help give you actionable insights into your brain during meditation and sleep. We have upcoming a series of brain health sessions with top neuroscientists and top thought leaders. So today's session is going to be on sleep. And then we have sessions on brain health and aging, brain health and meditation, and even more in the coming months. Today, I'm going to be interviewing our two amazing panelists, Dr. Olav Krieg-Olsen, he's a neuroscientist at the University of Victoria, and Dr. Shelby Harris, she's an expert in behavioral sleep medicine. There will be time for questions to the panelists, and then at the end of the official session, I'll also be staying on for community time in order to answer any other questions that anyone has about brain health, sleep, using your Muse, or anything else. So feel free to ask away, put your questions in the Q&A in the side. We have lots of people here to answer and engage. And I must say, it's totally amazing looking at all of you in the chat and being able to see all of you here as participants. And so hello from the very bottom of my heart. So now let's turn to brain health. So what is brain health? As a society, we're getting a better handle on what we do for our physical health. You know, we exercise, we eat well, but it seems harder to know exactly what to do for your brain health. And what do we even mean when we say brain health? We can refer both to our mental health, which is the health of our thoughts and our feelings, as well as our brain health, which is the health of the organ itself. And the two influence each other significantly. The health of your brain, which includes things like the proper timing and amount of your neurotransmitters, the firing of your neurons in the appropriate sequence, the health of your brain affects the health of your mind. For example, if you don't have enough serotonin, you're likely going to feel flat or sad. And then the thoughts that arise from that mind, from that brain into the mind, will more likely be skewed negatively. And likewise, the health of the mind affects the functioning of the brain as well. So for example, when you do a meditation practice and you train yourself to interrupt your wandering mind and then return back to the present moment, you are over time rewiring the circuits associated with both of those processes in your brain. Another example, a regular gratitude practice will literally solidify the neural relationships, rewire the organ of your brain in ways that make it more likely for positively tuned thoughts to occur more often in that mind. So a healthy brain, as you can imagine, is one that helps us function at its best in our daily life and at work. That includes the ability to have great cognitive health, be able to comprehend information, learn new things, read, think, plan, remember. It also means having a brain that can properly control all of your body's systems, like your heart, digestion, your thirst, your hunger. A healthy brain can properly integrate our senses, our sight, smell, taste, touch, and hearing. And a healthy brain also has a normal range of healthy thoughts, which means some great, some good, some not so good sometimes, and that's okay. And a normal emotional balance, not always happy, but in the range of appropriate normal response to the events in your life. So that's what a healthy brain is. Now, when we think about the practices that improve our brain health, it's kind of funny that for all of the complexity of this incredible organ we have, it's surprising that the habits that improve our physical health are the main ones that improve our brain health also. After all, the brain is just an organ in your body. And just like the rest of your body needs sufficient hydration, nutrition, and exercise in order to function well. In other words, it needs to be fed, watered, and used. So the things that we do to keep our cells and the rest of our body in tip-top shape are also the top practices for brain health, which means eating well, being active, meditation and stress relief, and sleeping. In the following sessions in the series, we're going to dive into each of these topics in depth. In today's session, we're going to focus on what might be the most important pillar for brain health that most of us just overlook and take for granted, and that is sleep. You guessed it. Today, we're going to talk about why sleep is important, what actually happens in the brain when you sleep, and then what we can do to get better sleep. And our experts today, Dr. Kriegelson and Dr. Harris, are going to join us here now. Please join me on the stage, Olav and Shelby.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Hello.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
So Dr. Olav Kriegelson is a neuroscientist at the University of Victoria, where he runs the Kriegolson Lab. His research interests include decision-making, learning, and mobile neuroscience. He's acknowledged as one of the top researchers in the world in the area of mobile EEG and has done multiple studies with Muse in real-world environments, including with NASA, with Major League Baseball players, surgeons, and even taking up Muses to monks in the Himalayas. Welcome, Olav.
Hi, well, thanks for having me, Ariel.
My joy and pleasure. And now Dr. Shelby Harris. Shelby is a clinical psychologist and expert in behavioral sleep medicine. Shelby treats sleep, anxiety, and depression using evidence-based, non-medication treatments. She teaches at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine and previously directed the sleep program at the Montefiore Medical Center. She's the author of the awesome Women's Guide to Overcoming Insomnia, which I bought my mom. And she also helped build the sleep collections in Muse. We're so happy to have you here. Welcome, Shelby.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. So we're going to dive into a great conversation today on sleep. And let's start at the very beginning. Olav, can you tell us why we need sleep?
That's a great question and probably the most important one. We need sleep for a couple of reasons. The primary one is rest. It sounds kind of silly, but your body needs to recover. You know, and your brain, as you go throughout the day, you get physically tired, muscles get tired, you spend energy, and your brain gets tired. Your brain is thinking all day and doing things, and sleep gives you a time for the body to recover. It's where your brain rests and recharges so that you can take on another day. There's another key reason, which is also it's when we learn. It's when memories form. So sleep is a key element for memory formation, and perhaps the most important one. So we need sleep to recover, and we need sleep to help us learn new things.
Awesome. So sleep is clearly amazing for us. Can you really dive in specifically to why sleep is important for brain health?
Yeah, well, our brain, you know, we experience stress and anxiety and all these things throughout our days. Everyone experiences them a little bit differently. And that, you know, that impacts the brain. You know, there's changes in serotonin, as you mentioned, and dopamine and other neurotransmitters. And that's your brain trying to deal with things. So if you don't get good sleep, then these problems don't get washed away as much as you might want them to. Like, you know, we could get really technical here, but at the end of the day, what really matters is that your brain has to fix these issues. Things have to rebalance. These brain systems have to get back to something that's good, so that when you wake up the next day, you're there. And if everyone that's had poor sleep knows this, right? Like if you have sleep problems, you're obviously more tired, but you're probably going to be a bit sadder throughout the day. You're probably not going to have as much energy. Your anxiety levels are probably up there a bit more. So poor sleep really impacts the brain because it doesn't let it recharge and get ready to do something else.
Thanks, Olav. Can we talk a little bit about the process of getting the brain to sleep and what happens when you're asleep? Shelby, can you tell us what happens when the brain goes to sleep, that transition from waking to sleep?
So the process of that is, I mean, essentially when sleep, I don't ever think of it as like an on-off switch. A lot of people think that when they go to bed at night, they get very frustrated that they can't fall right asleep. So it's about setting the stage for it. So essentially we have these circadian rhythms that happen in our body and in our cells, essentially. And the circadian rhythm for our body, it's essentially a body clock that tells us day, night, day, night. And there are all different types of rhythms in our body. And before bed, few hours before bedtime, our circadian rhythm is now starting to go down. And what happens is our brain starts to have melatonin come out. And melatonin starts to make our brains sleepy. So it's that process of before bed, a few hours before bed, melatonin starts coming out, washing our brain, and then we start getting sleepy and we sleep throughout the night when our circadian rhythm is going down essentially. And we've built up enough hunger for sleep. So that's setting the stage for sleep. That's why we say no blue lights and stuff like that. We're trying to make melatonin come out in our brain.
Awesome. So we have the circadian rhythm that's setting the stage for sleep. And then there's another awesome process that is sleep pressure. Shelby or Olav, do you want to speak to that?
So I think what I was saying earlier about appetite for sleep, that's sleep pressure. So I always think about it as when you get up in the morning, you've now slept for the night, so you're not so hungry for sleep. So as you stay up during the day, you build up more of an appetite, a pressure in your body to sleep. And when you build up more of that pressure, that along with the circadian drive to help with the melatonin and bring on upon sleep, you have that nice mix of appetite for sleep plus your body being ready for sleep, and it helps you to stay asleep throughout the night.
Awesome. So Olav, our body has just been prepared for sleep. Our circadian rhythms are moved. Our sleep pressure is at its highest. We're about to sleep. Tell us what's happening in our brains.
So when we sleep, there's 5 stages of sleep, and we basically cycle through these stages throughout the night. The first stage is called non-REM 1, and it's basically what you'd call light sleep, where you're just barely asleep. And then you drop down to non-REM 2, and then you drop down to non-REM 3, and then down to non-REM 4. And then you cycle back up and you sort of go through this pattern, and it's different for everyone. And then sometimes you enter REM sleep, which is when you're dreaming, of course. And if you wake up at night, that means you've climbed the ladder all the way back up to non-REM 1, and then you're awake. And then you keep cycling through. So it's not like you just drop down and stay there and it's flat and you come back up. It's this cycle throughout the night. And one thing that's really interesting, it's something that I'm really fascinated about, is the length of time you spend in these stages changes across the night. So typically you drop down to non-REM 3 and non-REM 4 because these are stages when your body's recovering, right? It's the stages you really need. And then later in the night as you sleep, you spend more and more time in non-REM 2. So one of the trivia points I drop for the audience is that non-REM 2 is when memory formation happens. So if you're not getting enough sleep, that's why you have trouble forming new memories and trouble learning. So if you get a healthy night's sleep and you've prepared well, and I'm sure Shelby will give us some great tips later, then you should get through all these stages and you'll have adequate time in each. But if you cut your sleep short or your sleep is impacted by factors, then you don't go through this normal healthy cycle and you spend too much time in the wrong stages. And that's when our brain health is impacted.
Can you tell us a little bit about how long we spend in each stage of sleep?
Yeah, it's roughly distributed evenly, but everyone has some individual differences. In the early stages, like I said, that's when you spend a lot of time in non-REM 3, non-REM 4. In the later stages of sleep, that's when you spend more and more time non-REM 2. But it's roughly evenly distributed. Probably if you're going to pick one that gets the least amount, it's REM sleep on average, but proportionately the percentages are roughly equal. We don't spend that much time in non-REM 1 either, to be fair. Unless I would imagine you're particularly light sleeper. Individual differences do impact these things.
So if you haven't slept well, you wake up the next day and you feel cognitively fatigued. You feel fatigued in your body and in your mind. Can you talk a little bit about what's going on that makes us feel fatigued like that? What is cognitive fatigue?
So this is an area, as you know, Ariel, that I'm particularly interested in. We've done some research in, and I'll share that in a second. But cognitive fatigue is essentially a state when your brain is tired. It's your brain not performing well. And the best example of cognitive fatigue is this is when we're more likely to make mistakes or poor decisions. It can be simple things, just forgetting to do something, or it can have major impact. Like cognitive fatigue at the extreme stages can actually cause traffic accidents or plane crashes, stuff we've looked at. So it's this state when your brain gets tired and you're more likely to make mistakes and perform well. And it also impacts a lot of the other, emotional factors. But our particular focus is this area where you're more likely to make poor decisions or make errors.
And you recently did a very large study looking at cognitive fatigue. Can you share some of the insights from it?
Yeah, of course. So we did this really cool study where we tested 1,000 people with EEG, and that was only possible because of the Muse. All right. So the Muse is, as most people know here, is this amazing little EEG system that you can put on and you can collect data really easily. So in our case, we were able to do a fatigue assessment on people in 7 minutes. So the idea was we showed up and they put the Muse on and we did the fatigue assessment and we collected data in mines, in hospitals, in shopping malls, you name it, we collected data. And really the big conclusion is that you can track cognitive fatigue using EEG. So in a lot of our studies, like we did one of the sub studies in there is we did a hospital study. And this one was particularly interesting. We're just working on publishing this right now, but we measured doctors and nurses at the start of a 12-hour shift in the ER. And lo and behold, wow, they're tired after 12 hours in the ER. But what was interesting is there was a subset of doctors and nurses who were cognitively fatigued at the start of their shifts. So if you actually deploy that technology out into the world, you're basically should be saying, well, maybe you shouldn't be working today, given what your job is.
I think a lot of people in this line sometimes feel like they're cognitively fatigued. And possibly part of that is due to the pandemic. Can you talk a little bit about pandemic fatigue and what that is?
Well, pandemic fatigue, it's the state that we're in where we're just worn down. Possibly the biggest difference between the two is that cognitive fatigue can occur for any number of reasons, but pandemic fatigue, in my mind at least, is tied to the stress we're all under. Like we have literally all been stressed now for over a year at some minor level. Now, some people deal with it pretty well. Some people don't deal with it well. So pandemic fatigue is the sort of state we're in where our brain is constantly stressed. We're constantly anxious. Like even going to the grocery store isn't as easy as it used to be, right? So your brain in that environment is like, oh yeah. And that it makes you tired, it makes you worn out. So it's very similar to cognitive fatigue. I've yet to see a head-to-head test of this, so I can't give a scientist's opinion other than a hunch. But the symptoms are the same, right? Your brain is tired. I guarantee during the pandemic, we've all made some choices we'd rather not make. Bought more ice cream, bought things off of Amazon, So it's a similar state that we're all experiencing, but it's because of what we're experiencing. Like it's just constant stress in the background.
I have a question here in the chat from an audience member. He wonders what happens when you are sleep deprived or deprived of a specific stage of sleep, like deep sleep, and is it possible to make up for it?
Well, Shelby's probably more of an expert than me on sleep health, so maybe we can answer this together in the sense that in terms of the neuroscience side of this, you know, the reality is if you miss these stages, it has impacts on things. So if you miss, like I mentioned this earlier, but if you don't get enough non-REM 2 sleep, your memory formation will be impacted. If you don't get enough non-REM 4 sleep, your body's ability to heal and your brain's ability to recharge will be impacted.
And that's, I think, why when you're talking about like making up for certain stages, we're very, I mean, we'll talk about suggestions later, but one of the things we always try to suggest first is like making sure that you're doing everything to try and optimize the quality of whatever sleep you're getting and keeping a routine bedtime, wake time within a big enough window so that you can try and enhance getting enough of the stages. There are also other things that people don't always think about that can influence the sleep staging you're getting into. So certain medications can actually suppress certain sleep stages. They can suppress REM sleep. And it's things like that that if you feel like even if you're getting enough sleep, you're unrefreshed, you're noticing issues with cognition, it's stuff to definitely get evaluated. But number one is just making sure you're getting a good enough window and you're being consistent with it so you can help try to optimize getting enough of the sleep staging throughout the night.
I have another question on the side here. How do sleep aids such as Zipalclone influence the different stages of sleep?
I think what I think that happens more a lot of times with those medications is they create, at least I specialize in insomnia. So a lot of the patients that I see, it creates more of an amnesia for the night. It doesn't always give people drastically more sleep that they're thinking about or that they want to get, but it does create a good amount of amnesia for the awakenings. And the thing that I think I always try to get people to understand is that to have a few awakenings, like Olaf was saying, after you finish a full cycle, we typically have awakenings throughout the night. So it's normal to have a quick awakening, maybe remember, maybe not, go right back to sleep. The medications tend to create the amnesia for any awakenings throughout the night for a lot of people.
So since I'm seeing a lot more questions in the chat here about how to get better sleep, let's dive right into that topic. Shelby, can you tell us the thing we all want to know? How do you get better sleep?
That's a great question to which there are many different parts, right? So when I think about sleep, it's an interesting thing because there's people who just don't make sleep a priority or they are very inconsistent in what they're doing. And then there are people who have sleep disorders, other kinds of insomnia, sleep apnea, other stuff that we need to address, or it could be mood disorders, medical things. So I always start at the top, the easiest quote unquote stuff to really start with. And that's just basic sleep hygiene that you hear about all over the place, right? So make sure that your room is dark, quiet, comfortable, cool. I always say like a cave, essentially, a pretty cave that you want to be in, right? So stuff that is not going to disrupt you in the middle of the night is really important. Consistency is super important as well. Trying to keep, because you have that circadian rhythm, that's a body clock. So we try to outsmart it by having a day or a weekday clock and then a weekend clock. It doesn't work that way. Most people need consistency. So to really work on having a good bedtime and wake time that's pretty routine most days, and I know it's not perfection. And things like caffeine, all that basic stuff, like limit caffeine within 8 hours. Exercise is really great. You should exercise, but don't do it right before bed. I always recommend about 4 to 6 hours before bed. It helps to warm you up and then cool you off so that you will help enhance some sleep. Now, that's all the stuff you start with, right? And then if you find that you're someone who just your brain is busy at bedtime, right? Then I'm a huge fan of building in things like meditation, wind down periods for a half hour to an hour before bed, limiting screens. I love meditation because it helps to quiet that puppy dog brain, right? The really active brain. And the more you practice it during the day, especially during the day, it makes it easier to be able to focus at bedtime and let whatever worries about sleep or thoughts about sleep you have go to the wayside. And then if those are not enough, right? Sleep hygiene works for some people, but if that's not enough and you still have or just have chronic issues with falling asleep, staying asleep, or you're struggling with medication or trying to get off medication, that's when you might want to see a sleep specialist to get either evaluated if you snore, if you move a lot in the middle of the night, if you have vivid dreams that are disrupting your sleep quality, or to talk about insomnia. And one of the most effective treatments for insomnia is something called cognitive behavior therapy for insomnia. So that takes sleep hygiene, but then it goes way further. Bedtimes, wake times get changed, all different stuff. So there are many different approaches. Just start with sleep hygiene and then kind of work your way down.
Awesome. So recap list for everyone of this sleep hygiene. 1, make sure your bedroom is dark and cool at night because your circadian rhythm is set both by light as well as by temperature. You have a temperature dip before you fall asleep, which takes you to sleep.
That's why I always think of a cave. Yep.
Yep. Make sure you don't have blue light in your eyes an hour and a half before sleeping. So turn filters on your technology, dim your lights an hour and a half before sleeping to help set your circadian rhythms.
And a quick thing to add, if someone is really stuck with the phone, a lot of people are nowadays, especially with the pandemic, just slowly decrease the time or increase the time. So start by just not having a phone 10 minutes before bed, then a week later, 20 minutes and get there. So blue light is a hard one for a lot of people, but that's really important.
Exercise, and try not to exercise at night because that will wake you up. I actually saw a great study that shows that when you exercise in the morning, it actually sets your circadian rhythms earlier. So if you're trying to become an early bird, exercise in the morning. It's been my salvation these days.
100%. Caffeine.
Caffeine. So no caffeine after noon, after 12 o'clock. You want 12 hours before bedtime with no caffeine in your system.
Yeah. I mean,
No
some
caffeine after 12
hours. Some people will do 8 hours, but the average is about 12. So I
Yeah.
try 12, but I'll push it depending. And younger adults tend to have the 8 hour window. Older adults a little bit longer. Alcohol is another big one. So alcohol, nicotine, heavy meals, liquids, limit that. I always say the rule of 3 hours. Limit those within 3 hours of going to bed.
Consistency. So make sure that you're consistent in the bedtime that you go to sleep and you wake up. Have the same bedtime during the week as in the weekends. Revolutionary to me. I've started to do that now. I wake up at 8 a.m. I allow myself a 1 hour grace. I'm up at 8 a.m. on weekends and 7 a.m. on weekdays. And it has made a huge difference to help me fall asleep every night because my body is now trained to this rhythm.
It needs to
I
know.
just I just like to chime in and emphasize the screen thing because there's literally scientific data that shows that putting a screen in front of your face, because of the refresh rate on the device, how fast it draws, literally activates your brain. It's literally increasing brain activation, which is the last thing you want to do. And I call this the mum problem because my mum will sit there every night, God bless her, and put her screen in front of her place and play games. So it's even engaging things. It's like the worst thing you can do. So what I've got her do and what I do, which is another good tip, is don't use your phone as an alarm clock. Like I went out and bought a regular alarm clock and I leave the electronics out of the bedroom, right? I just don't bring them in anymore. And it's helped me and it's helped my mom. And the final mom tip I'll give you, because she's amazing, is her third sleep problem is she snacks during the night. So she'll wake up for a snack and she snacks on chocolate. And I'm like, Mom, what are you doing? It's the worst thing you can do. So you're literally putting, oh, so
Caffeine.
snacking during the middle of the night, probably not the best plan either.
Yeah, it's a tough one. The snacking, it's like people when they're up and they're just not sleeping, they're trying to find something to kind of take their brain off of not sleeping. So phone, whatever it might be. And like I love that. I mean, I have people use just any kind of alarm clock that is not a phone. Get the phones, and it's hard with the teenagers especially. Get the phone out of the room, model it for your family. And the other thing is if you can't sleep, if you have a bad night, don't lay in bed then scrolling on your phone because you're just going to now make the bed about a place of being awake, tossing and turning, and maybe getting frustrated that you're not sleeping. So have it planned out. Oh, okay. If I can't sleep tonight, I'm going to go and I'm going to read an old-fashioned book, do a puzzle, something without a screen that's away from your bed to just pass the time. Sleep will happen when it happens. You can't force it. But laying in bed, tossing and turning, or on a screen is only going to make it worse.
Shelby, can I ask you a question given your expertise? So that is a true thing, right? In the sense that if you're having trouble sleeping, you should actually get out of bed and not lie there tossing and turning. Is that right?
100%. So a lot of people will use the rule of 20 minutes. So they'll say, if you've been laying in bed for 20 minutes, get up and go somewhere else. I don't like 20 minutes because I don't want people watching the clock either. So I said, when you get frustrated or when you know that you're active, people know the difference between a quick awakening to use the bathroom and then going back to sleep versus I'm awake, that feeling you get. When you get out of bed and just do something to pass the time, quiet, calm, cool, darker, but not sitting in the dark. I want you to pass the time. What you're doing is you're training your body that the bed is only for sleep. So a lot of people will get out of bed hoping that reading is going to make them sleepy. That's not the point of it. If you get sleepy reading, fine, that's great. But it's just so that you're not laying there associating the bed with a wakeful activity. And one quiz I give to people all the time, new patients of mine, is I'll say, when you think of your, especially insomnia patients, like when you think of your bed, what's the number one thing you think? And almost never, or yeah, do they say sleep? It's usually frustration, tossing and turning, rest. It's never sleep because they're spending so much time there laying there, tossing and turning. That's why we get out of bed.
And let's talk about meditation and sleep, because we've talked about all sorts of other things that help you sleep. And there's a question about having the phone close so that you can use your Muse to help you fall asleep, which is different than looking at your phone. So do you want to address that?
So I'm totally okay with that if that's something that you want to do. It's just you have to be aware that if you always use meditation to listen to fall asleep, you might become reliant on it to fall asleep in the middle of the night. And that's okay. If that's something you're all right with, totally cool. But it will make it worse though if you're staring at the clock. And I'm okay. Like some people like to have white noise. They like to have things to listen to. That's okay for falling asleep. It's just don't look at the timer.
Yeah. So the key rule, do not check the time. So the beauty of meditations is that they allow you to take your mind away. They can bring your brain into the hypnagogic state. They allow your body to relax. They can get you into sleep in a place that has a lot less cortisol, so you're likely to sleep more thoroughly throughout the night.
Exactly.
You just don't want to be doing something that's causing you to toss and turn with a blue light in your face.
I am a huge fan of meditation, especially during, like you were saying, it gets you into the stage. You can do everything to set the stage for sleep. So I love meditation during that half hour to hour long wind down period, especially. So if you can figure out a good practice, listen to something that will help to dim that brain switch a bit, that's really the sweet spot for meditation, in my opinion.
I was going to say, my son, I know the Muse can be used while asleep, but what my son does, he was having trouble sleeping. So we got him to do meditation with the Muse, before he went to bed. And it was amazing. It was all of a sudden he started sleeping.
It really works. It shuts down your mind. It really, really works.
That's the point of it. Yep.
Yeah, we're actually able to see in the Muse data and the studies that we've done, because it's tracking your brain as you fall asleep, we can see when you fall asleep, and we can see what kind of guided content helps you fall asleep faster. So yeah, it's amazing. So we can see in studies that we've done where individuals are listening to a body scan versus a visualization versus a different kind of meditation, we can actually see at what point they fall asleep, what type of meditation, what cadence of voice helps you fall asleep. So we've really been able to dial in on exactly what it is that can help get you, like flip the switch and get you into that state and guide you into that beautiful state of finally sleeping. It's been great. There was another question in the sidebar on blue light blocking glasses. Do they really work?
Olav, do you have any thoughts on it before
I would say that in terms of published academic research, the jury is out and probably leaning towards maybe not. But there's just not a lot out there yet. There's a lot more studies that need to be run. So that I always try to answer my questions 100% grounded on what I've read, and maybe I haven't read everything. So Shelby.
I agree 100% actually. So I'm a fan. I always like to do tiered approaches, right? So some people just going completely cold turkey is hard. So if for some reason a lot of people are fighting me recently and they just have to watch The Office or something randomly to listen to because they're used to it. So if you can stay away from social media, if you can stay away from work initially, put on the screen, put on the f.lux you can do on like a laptop, which will help filter it. You can do the glasses, but I'm always cautious to say it's not going to necessarily do anything. But the light is a big issue, and then it's also the content of what you're watching too. So there's a mix of both, in my opinion. So I try to taper people off reliance on the screens to begin with. And once in a while, if they have to have it on, then I go blue light glasses, but I don't want that to be a routine habit.
Awesome. So we have all just gone through a relatively traumatic time in shifting our circadian rhythms. It's called daylight savings time. And I know a lot of people are curious about how to properly do daylight savings time, because some people are still feeling kind of tired.
So it's a tough one. So for some people, if it's in the future, if it's an issue, it's actually better, I find, if you can do like your prep for it in advance, essentially. So with daylight saving, it's spring ahead. So you go to bed a little bit earlier every day for a number of days before the actual change, so that when the actual night changes, then you spring ahead and you don't really fully lose that hour. You're slowly changing your circadian rhythm 15 minutes on each end, bedtime and wake time, over a few days, so it's not as jarring. That being said, it's already happened. So now we'll load it out. Light is key. So when you get up in the morning, make sure you're getting a lot of light. Open your shades. If it's still for some reason really dark where you are, there are really good sun or dawn simulators that you can get for lights that are going to be helpful. And then also exercise, like we were talking about in the morning, is really important. And just make sure that whatever quality of sleep you're getting at night is quality. So you're limiting caffeine before bed, you're limiting alcohol, that stuff. Hopefully over time you'll start to adjust.
Great. Now the next question is for the audience. I want you, if you feel moved, to put into the chat what you dreamed about last night, or the last dream that you can remember. It's going to be totally fascinating to see the things that float around in people's minds while we sleep. And while people are sharing their dreams, Shelby, can you tell us why it is that we dream?
I think that's especially as a psychologist, it's a very controversial topic, and a psychologist in New York City. So some people will analyze dream content. They go very kind of Freudian on it. In my opinion, as a sleep specialist, we really think of dream sleep as really just your brain's filing cabinet. It's a simple way to think about it. But when you're dreaming, it's emotion processing, it's memory processing as well, but really emotions are happening then, or formed better then. And your brain is literally going through the day trying to figure out, what do I make files for to have to deal with? What do I need to shred? And that's how I think of dreaming. It's like, because a lot of time dreams are just kind of jumbled up versions of reality. So your brain's just in a weird way trying to create files and shred.
Now there's some people who, go ahead, Olaf.
I was just going to say from the neuro side, if you actually look at the brain waves, the EEG signal using a device like the Muse or something else, what's interesting is the brain waves during dream sleep are very similar to awake, like very similar. They're a little bit off, but they're very similar, which is probably another reason probably why we dream at some level, right? Which is we're in a brain state, which is you're not awake, but your brain activity is kind of close.
There's some awesome dreams. Someone stole the truck he borrowed from his dad while he was at the gas station buying replacement wipes. Little anxiety dream there. A conversation with somebody's son. Having to speak in front of a large group. Actually, a dream that I've personally been having a fair amount lately is I'm in any kind of social situation and the people around me have forgotten that there's a pandemic and I'm trying not to get too close to them. It's a common anxiety dream that's been coming up for me. Somebody's been having vivid nightmares about their sister's wedding. And there's also people who are not having any dreams. Can you speak to why some people remember their dreams and some people don't?
Olaf, do you have anything to? I mean, some people just tend to remember it more than others. Olaf, do you have anything from the neuroscience side?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the reality is that your memory system isn't capturing it for whatever reason. One of the things is individual differences. Like we're not all the same, and what I find interesting is people assume that all our brains are the same, but look at our bodies. Like literally look at our bodies. Some of us are tall, some are short, some are thin, some are a little bit wider. We come in a whole range of colors and genders. So our brains are like that. So everyone's brain functions a little bit differently. And I wouldn't be surprised if you don't remember your dreams. Now, if you don't remember your dreams because of, say, you drank too much or something, that's because your brain's literally in a different state. But there are some people where it's just not the way their brain works.
And something to add to that too is that I see a lot of people who have sleep apnea. So sometimes people who have sleep apnea have a lot of apneas during REM sleep, so they don't get any good quality REM sleep. It's very broken. And then when we actually treat the sleep apnea, their brain has what we call REM rebound. So they're having a lot more REM. And then all of a sudden, when they're treating their apnea with this PAP or whatever, they report having lots of dreams because now they're having
Yeah.
actual REM sleep. They're getting a lot very dense REM sleep and you can start dreaming. So if you also feel that you just don't have good quality sleep or you're taking a lot of certain medications and you don't dream, that might be something to mention.
I was going to emphasize that point because personally, I know that's true. When I am getting good sleep and following good sleep hygiene, I dream more. And when my sleep is disrupted and I'm getting poor sleep, I usually don't dream or dream less.
And another fun fact about dreaming is that if you wake up in the middle of a dream with some good sleep before it, you're more likely to remember your dream. So those of you who are waking up to your alarm while you're still kind of groggy and you're like, what am I doing here? Waking up out of a dream, you're far more likely to remember that content.
And to add, because someone had mentioned nightmares on there, so I specialize in treating nightmares. So a lot of people just think there's nothing that can be done about nightmares or they've tried medications. There are really effective treatments for nightmares. So sometimes people have chronic nightmares, they actually have sleep apnea. So sometimes we have to address that. PTSD, there can be a lot of reasons. There's just no reason that you're having nightmares. There are some people who just have nightmares. But look up treatments like imagery rehearsal therapy. There are also medications. There are things that can be done because essentially the way we think about nightmares from our perspective is your brain's trying to make that file, but you keep waking up from a nightmare essentially. So then when you go back to sleep, you have a similar kind of quality of dreams because your brain is trying to actually make that file over and over again. So imagery rehearsal therapy helps you to essentially come up with a new narrative and visualize it. And it's a non-medication approach and it works in just a few sessions for some people.
That's fantastic. Looking at all of the anxiety related dreams that many of us have shared here, it seems clear that methodologies that allow us to be more relaxed and more at peace as we're falling asleep are far more likely to give us better, saner, more relaxed dreams. Awesome. So now I think we should open it up to everybody to ask their questions. I know Talia has been cataloging questions as we go. Talia, do you want to join us and ask some of the questions out of the chat? And we'll try to answer as many as we can.
Sure thing. Okay, so we do have a few sleep questions. So Devin was asking, how do you shut your mind? Ooh, hold on, let me just pull that back up. How do you shut your mind down at bedtime? I often have trouble shutting down my thinking at night.
Should I just take it? Okay.
Go for it.
Okay. So the way I think about it first is also just make sure that you're thinking about that dimmer switch, right? So are you giving yourself a half hour at least, ideally an hour, to not be in front of screens? Because that can just be very alerting. What are you doing? Are you doing work up until that bedtime? Make sure that you're finding things that are quiet, calm, relaxing, and dim light to be doing for that hour before bed. The next thing is also make sure wake time is super important. So that's where the consistency comes into play. If you get up at the same time every day, you're going to build that sleep drive, that sleep hunger for bedtime. So if you notice that you might have trouble falling asleep on certain nights, like Sunday night or Monday night, maybe it's because you slept in a little later than you normally would or napped. That's where I love meditation. So if you find that you just can't quiet your brain down, meditation is really, really helpful for quieting that busy brain. And then the other thing that we recommend for some people, this is something you'd want to run by your doctor, is consider going to bed a little later. It depends what your bedtime wake time already is and how restricted you are, if there are any other issues. But sometimes if you go to bed a little bit later and spend a little less time in bed, you're actually going to get in bed at a time when you're sleepier, and it helps to almost turn the brain off a little bit faster. And then you can slowly increase the time you go to bed or get in bed a little earlier as you're doing better.
Awesome. Next question to Leah. Thank you, Shelby.
Yep, we have one from Brian who is asking, is there anything other than sleep that can address cognitive fatigue?
Well, I can take a stab at this one. The truth of the matter is no, but there's things you can do to help alleviate it. And this goes back to the lifestyle stuff that Ariel and Shelby have talked about, which is, exercising, eating healthy, anything that improves your overall brain health will have a positive impact on cognitive fatigue. But in terms of actually squashing it, you do need to recover from it. So you can't make it go away. So, a lot of people have a cup of coffee because their brain is tired, and that might give you some short-term benefit, but it's not going to fix cognitive fatigue. It's just going to sort of help you for a little bit. But overall, healthy lifestyle, and it sounds kind of funny. I always say, it's the stuff my mom taught me. But it's true. If you do exercise and you eat healthy and you do the other things we've talked about, that will help with cognitive fatigue and overall brain health.
Particularly the stress management piece, making sure that you're not burnt out, that your adrenals are working properly, that you don't have too much cortisol running around your body, that your adrenaline's low, that you are in basically good sort of hormonal health by not being overly stressed. It's amazing when you take a little vacation, what can happen to your brain and your cognitive function.
For sure.
Okay, we have a question from Bonnie. She wants to know if there's a way to help sleep if your sleep is disrupted because of chronic pain.
So if it's chronic pain, my area of specialty is cognitive behavior therapy for insomnia. So like I said, it's just basic sleep hygiene, but then goes much further beyond that. So limiting time in bed, wake time. There is good data showing that CBT for insomnia can help to consolidate sleep for people with chronic pain, fibromyalgia, various issues. It's literally just for many patients between 2 to 12 sessions, depending on the complexity. So if medications can help as well, but we really try to do CBT for insomnia. It's the first line treatment for insomnia across the board in primary care and sleep medicine. So if you have a provider near you, if you have a sleep doctor, you can ask them for CBT for insomnia. There are a bunch of books, there are apps out there. There are a lot of different resources to try because that can help for some people consolidate sleep at night.
I should maybe mention at this time that we're actually in the midst of testing a large study of a Muse pain intervention that's being built. There's one test being done at the Mayo Clinic, another being done at multi-site at 2 different clinics using this very specific program that we've built for pain. So if that rolls out well, then that may be something that will be available to Muse users.
Awesome.
Okay, we have a question from Howard. He wants to know more about lucid dreaming. So it might be interesting to maybe talk about, what's happening in the brain during lucid dreaming and how do you tap into that?
Ola, do you have anything to add on that?
It's one I don't know a lot about, I'll be honest.
Me as well. People come to me more to get rid of nightmares than to do lucid dreaming. So, and the nightmare treatment that I do, the imagery rehearsal therapy, is all done during the day instead of trying to teach lucid dreaming. So I really don't have much to add to that. Sorry.
Okay, we have another sleep question here about melatonin. This is a question from Kathy. She wants to know if melatonin helps and if it's safe to take.
It's a matter of what you're looking for it to help with. So I'm in the States, in the US, and here melatonin is not regulated by our FDA. I don't know about in Canada, but it's not regulated by the FDA. So a lot of people will just get any kind of melatonin supplement off the shelf. And there are some studies that have shown that some pill bottles have varying degrees of melatonin and not written. So we try to go with, if you're going to use melatonin, something, at least in the States, is USP certified, something that's had a third party look to make sure that it is what it is in the bottle. Now, that all that being said, when it comes to insomnia, so trouble falling asleep, staying asleep, waking too early, melatonin has very mixed data on it. It's actually not the cure that a lot of people think that it will be. And the majority of people I see have tried melatonin. It does not do very much for insomnia. That being said, if you're someone who is a night owl or we use it for jet lag, we use it for more circadian rhythms where you can sleep, but your body clock is off. So someone who might go to bed at 4 a.m. and wake up at noon, and they can sleep, it's just not in the timing they want. We actually use tiny, tiny doses of melatonin, like a half a milligram, many hours before bedtime to help pull their sleep-wake period in a certain, or timing in a certain range that they would want to use. So that's actually when I use melatonin. I don't use it so often for insomnia patients. And one thing to note is that melatonin is often, it's just because it's over the counter, it can still have side effects. So I see a lot of people who get somewhat dizzy, they feel more sleepy in the morning from it. Some people have vivid dreams because of melatonin. So there are things to think about, even if you were to try it.
And somebody asks, is there tolerance buildup?
I don't actually know fully about that for the larger, like 3-5 milligrams, because most of the people I see, it just doesn't do anything, and it may have worked for a few days, but then but that's also because I think it might not be the most effective for insomnia. But I've used the tiny doses for a long time with patients, and it's been okay for like that sleep phase issue, and I haven't had any issues with them. But I try not to have people on it for years on end.
And I'm just going to throw back for the person who is curious about lucid dreaming, many people curious about lucid dreaming. It's actually something that we're really interested in at Muse and something that we've been experimenting extensively with, given that we have a device that actually knows when you're dreaming and can give you various interventions. So there's just a little carrot for you that there may be things that are coming out in the future in this realm.
Awesome.
I also wanted to mention Madison shared a link in the chat with a blog that we put out recently on lucid dreaming if you want to learn more about that. Okay, we have another question from Gianluca who wants to know what happens when you're sleep deprived or deprived of a specific sleep stage, for instance, deep sleep. Is it possible to make up for it?
I think we actually answered that one earlier.
That one, okay. So Bruce wants to know about dreams. How does it affect health, memory, and sleep patterns? Is there too much dreaming?
Olav, do you want to take it?
Well, from a simple I guess the simple answer is that if you spent a disproportionate amount of time in any sleep state, that would not be great relative to the individual, right? And what I mean by that is just like I mentioned individual differences, like all of us, if we all figured out everyone's percent of time in stage 4 sleep, it would be slightly different. But yeah, so too much time in any sleep sleep state is technically bad because it means that your sleep cycle isn't normal for some reason. However, with individual differences, like we've said a few times, and I hate to use that as a cop-out answer, but it's just people always think that they're not normal, right? Because they're a little bit different from people. We're all different. But yeah, so technically, if it was too much and you were losing other sleep stages, that would be a problem. But if it was okay for you and you were having healthy sleep and you did a sleep assessment and you were functioning well, maybe for you it's okay.
Yeah. I think to add on that, when we see people in the sleep lab in the sleep center, it's usually they're dreaming so much that they just don't feel refreshed in the morning.
Yeah.
They just couldn't turn their brain off ever at night, and that's when it's problematic. That's when we actually will intervene, but normally we don't do much otherwise.
Thank you. I've noticed a number of questions here about napping. Shelby, would you like to speak to naps and how to do them properly?
Okay, so that's a complicated two-part answer. So one is if you're someone who struggles with sleep at night, naps are generally not advised. I mean, I'll make some exceptions for some people, but because what you're trying to do, like we talked about with that sleep pressure, that sleep appetite, naps are like snacking on sleep essentially. So if you're snacking on sleep, you're not going to be as hungry for a big meal at night. That's how you have to think about it. So try to stay away from napping if you can, because then you'll build up an appetite. If you must take a nap, and you have insomnia, try to just limit it to 20 minutes, but earlier in the day, like before 2 p.m., so that you have enough time to build up that sleep drive and that hunger for sleep. Now, some people, if you don't have trouble with sleep at night, napping is great. We call them power naps, right? They can really be that little bit of that cognitive refresh for a little while, help with productivity, help with mood. It's not a substitute for nighttime sleep, though. I want people to realize that. So if you want to do a power nap, the best way to do it is just the same way. Before 2 p.m., if your bedtime's around 10, 11 at night, take about, I usually tell people if you can go to your bed, that's great. If not, just try to make a comfortable space. Set a timer for 30 minutes and then take about a 20-minute nap. That way you're allowing for some time to fall asleep. Make sure it's nice, quiet, dark, and cool and comfortable. And then a half hour later you wake up and it's just enough sleep to be refreshing, but not deep enough that you wake up and you feel groggy.
Awesome, thank you. And I think we have time for one more question, Talia.
Sure. There's a question from Chris. He wants to know if you have any ideas for early morning awakening or prolonged awakening during the early morning, so middle to late insomnia.
I think it varies for a few, there can be a number of reasons why that might happen. The first thing could be, are you getting up in the morning? We see that a lot of times with people who have a lot of anxiety. So are you waking up? Are you on your phone? Are you worrying? What are you doing during that time? Have you kind of trained yourself? I have some patients that will just get up earlier and then go and eat, like I was saying earlier. So they've almost trained themselves to get up and eat. The other things to consider are, we see a lot of early morning awakenings in some patients who have a lot of apnea. So do you snore at night? Do you wake up feeling unrefreshed? Do you have any issues with morning headaches? That stuff you might want to think about. Another thing to consider is your bedtime. So some people just spend too much time in bed. It sounds like everyone talks about the 8 hours, but maybe if you go to bed a bit later at the beginning, it might help push that wake time a bit later. And if it pushes the wake time a bit later and you're getting more consolidated sleep, then you can slowly, like 15 minutes every week or so, go to bed earlier. You need to consolidate it a little bit more.
Awesome, thank you so much. So thank you for everybody for your awesome questions. And thank you so much, Shelby and Olav, for giving us all of your amazing information today. That was wonderful.
It's fun.
Really appreciated. Totally fun.
Totally fun. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you. So to everyone in the audience, you're going to be getting a recording of this. So if there are things that you want to go back to and listen again, they're there. We're also going to continue the conversation in the Muse community group. You'll get an email with a link letting you know how to join that conversation if you have more questions that were unanswered. And I'm actually going to be staying on for another few minutes to answer any other questions that people have. And you can unmute yourself and ask them to me personally, so we can have a little bit of a community jam. So with that, Thank you, Olav and Shelby. That was an honor and a pleasure to get to spend time with both of you. Thank you for everybody who joined us today. And Talia or Madison in the background, if you'd like to allow people to raise their hand to ask questions, we can move on to that portion of the engagement.
Okay. Let's have a look here. So
if anybody would like to ask a question, simply raise your hand. There's a raise hand button at the bottom of your screen. Talia will see the raise hand. She will unmute you, and then you can ask whatever is on your mind.
okay, we're going to start with Janice.
Go for it, Janice. You can speak. We can't hear you, Janice, if you're speaking.
Oh, I wanted to ask
Yeah.
specifically what medications will interrupt sleep. I'm taking some medications for chronic pain. I'm not sure that they're interfering with my sleep.
Sure. So there are a number of medications that have stimulants in them that can interrupt your sleep. The most common stimulant medications are, so some antihistamines put you to sleep, like diphenhydramine makes you very, like Benadryl makes you very dopey and sleepy. Other medications that are antihistamines have ephedrine in them, and those are very stimulating. Anything Tylenol cold and flu daytime also has a stimulating quality to it. But then there's a broad host of medications that could also be interfering with your sleep. So if you want to check specifically on your medication, the best thing to do is to just Google it and Google side effects or sleep, and that will give you an indication. And if you feel like your medication is keeping you from sleeping, talk to your doctor about whether, or your pharmacist about whether you can take it at a different time of the day. Often you can switch nighttime medications to morning and thereby have less impact in your sleep. Thank you, Janice.
Thank you.
Talia, who's
All right, so Ronald is next. So you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi there, Ariel.
Hey, Ronald.
Hi. Really love your product. Been using it for a month and a half now, and really gathering some interesting information on sleep. That my question was really around. I struggle with insomnia, which I didn't realize the extent to which I do. My score for the first 10 days was 40 out of 100. And I have had, since that point, I have had days where I've been at 0 and other days when I've been at 85. And some nights, like 2 nights ago, I had a 70, and then last night it was 14. And it says that really, I'm, apart from a very brief stint of sleep, I'm not actually sleeping again till like 5 or 6 in the morning. Yeah, I'm not aware of being so awake or even awake. So I can't get up because I don't even know that I'm not asleep. Is there a sort of state you can be in that's somewhere in between, or does Muse say sleep is sleep and you should be consciously aware? Or
So when you look at your sleep graph, what are you seeing? And because what might be happening is that you're in light sleep. So light sleep can often feel like you are both asleep and awake. So when you're sort of like lying on the couch or you're lying in bed and somebody comes and taps you and they tell you you're asleep and you're like, oh, no, I wasn't. I was here. Everything was fine. That's stage 1 or light sleep. And there are some people who end up spending a significant amount of time in light sleep or stage 2, which is also a lighter phase of sleep. So it may be that you are sleeping, but your sleep is in much lighter stages. And so you're not getting sufficient amounts of deep sleep that you need, which is what your sleep score would suggest. And so you might look at things like sleep apnea, which may mean that you're waking up regularly throughout the night. You could look at things that may be interrupting your sleep, like medication or caffeine, where you are still falling asleep, but your quality of sleep is poor. Alcohol before you go to sleep will give you a poor quality of sleep throughout the night.
I don't have any of those things.
I'm happy to chat with you afterwards and see if we can,
Okay.
if we can figure out exactly what it is that may be going on.
Well, I'd love to know because, one night it's saying 6 hours, 38 sleep, and the next it's saying 1 hour, 15 for the whole night.
Yep, put your email in the chat and I'll reach out to you personally and we'll see
Okay,
if we
brilliant.
can get you sleeping.
Thank you. Thank you. That would be awesome.
My
Thank
sincere
you.
pleasure. I also noticed another question in the chat here, thoughts about the lymphatic system and brain cleaning during sleep and implications for correlation to brain disease. So there, in the last 5 years, has been some fascinating research that indicates that during sleep, you have a buildup of toxins, essentially just the compounds that are generated in your brain during the day, which are then flushed out of your brain at night. This is true. It actually happens. It's a system called your lymphatic system. So just like you have the lymphatic system in your body that moves fluids throughout, there is the glymphatic system in your brain that moves fluids throughout your brain. So over the course of the night, your cells actually change size and allow for a little bit of space between them to allow for a flow of fluid to flush through your brain. And one of the things that potentially clears from your brain during the night is beta amyloid protein. And you may be familiar with beta amyloid because it is one of the main proteins that can contribute to Alzheimer's disease. So there's been lots of research and interest lately in the relationship between sleep and Alzheimer's disease now that it's been discovered that beta amyloid seems to be clearing from the brain during night. And so good sleep can allow you to have a healthier brain and potentially decrease your chances of cognitive dysfunction as a result of mild cognitive impairment or Alzheimer's. Those are, stretches to make, but that's where the research seems to be pointing. Talia, do we have another question from the audience?
Yep. We're going to move over to Rajan.
Hi, Ariel, how are you?
Wonderful, thank you. How are you, Rajan?
Doing good. So yeah, I have a couple of things into one question. So one is, what is a good practice? Doing meditation in the morning or the evening? Is it better to do it once you get up, or do it before you go to sleep? Second thing, when I use the mind meditation with Muse, you calm your mind so that you hear the birds, but then you're thinking that you want the bird. So it's like a cycling. It's like I'm thinking that I want it, so I don't want to think. But then when I keep quiet, then I pine for the birds. And third, like when I'm using the Muse for sleeping, it's like I feel that I have something on me, and then if I sleep for 8-9 hours, I see that the Muse Bluetooth has got disconnected, and I have a report for only 4 hours. The night graph freaks me out. Oh, I had only deep sleep for some time and in a light sleep for some time. But then, yeah, I mean, how do I utilize it better?
Sure, happy to address that. So first question, it doesn't matter if you meditate in the morning or the evening. It actually is just a personal preference. Some people love to meditate in the morning. It makes them feel great. Some people feel groggy in the morning. It makes them feel terrible. Really, that's a personal preference. If you're trying to improve your sleep, meditation in the evening is obviously key, as we heard from Shelby and Olav, to help you sleep. Your second question about the birds, I'm like smiling and giving thumbs up because it's literally what the birds are there for. It is a critically important lesson in meditation. So you close your eyes. The first time you meditate, you enter into the zone. The first time you're using Muse, you maybe hear birds. It doesn't mean anything. You're like, okay, there's some birds that are chirping. The next time you go to Muse, when you know that the bird is a reward for being in a focused attention state, your mind gets very attached to it and wants that reward again and is striving for the reward. And when you strive for it, you cannot get it. This is an intentional thing that was built in here. It is teaching you equanimity, the ability to be okay with what is. This is a fundamental concept in meditation, that we want to be equally as uninvested in our rewards as in our failures. So the birds serve on multiple levels. So the first thing that they do is they serve to just let you know that you've been in focused attention, that you're in the meditation focused attention state for a period of time, which is great. The second thing that they do is they actually serve as a piece of neurofeedback to inform your brain that, yes, this is the state you want to be in, and really allow your brain to mark, attend to, and feel rewarded by this state so that it learns to be here more often. That's how the neurofeedback works, by giving you reinforcement for being in this state. like standard classical conditioning. And then you come back here faster and more often. You can meditate and get into the state faster.
So it
The
is
third
good.
thing that it is, hold on. So then the third thing that it does is it then undermines the reward nature of it to teach you a lesson in meditation, which is that we should not be striving for our rewards, that we should not, really be grasping and caring and frustrated when we don't get the things that we want. It is the fundamental lesson of equanimity. And when you learn to simply accept the birds when they come and they go, that's when you get them. That's when you're able to be in that state of equanimity.
Thank you. That was perfect. So, and is it recommended to start 10 minutes, then add 15 minutes, then go 20, then 30? Because I tried 30 and I screwed up big time. I said, oh no, I'll go back to 10 minutes.
Totally. Start with whatever feels comfortable for you. Some people, I've literally seen them start at 1 minute or 3 minutes because that's all they can handle. And they feel, intimidated and jittery after that. And then you just work up bit by bit. And so diving into a 30-minute practice might just give you 25 minutes of frustration. So just like any exercise, do what seems comfortable and then push your edges a little bit further. And notice what happens in your body when you feel like, uh-oh, I'm not doing it anymore. Because part of the practice of meditation is being able to see what comes up, sit with it, let it come and let it go. And so after 7 minutes, you might be like really fidgety and be like, oh, I should only be meditating 5 minutes. Nope, it's cool that you're meditating for all 10. You had 3 of those minutes feeling fidgety. That's okay. What did you do in those moments? How did you respond to yourself? What did you think about? What did you allow? And how did you get through it? How did you allow yourself to simply be with a sense of agitation or a sense of irritation? Notice, allow, and let it pass.
Perfect. Because I'm away from my wife, so I can spend more time meditating. So that is, I'm enjoying it. Okay, perfect. Thanks.
You are so welcome. And then there was a corollary. You'd asked a question about Muse for sleep. So the proper way to use the Muse device to help you fall asleep is to slip on the Muse to select. You can select either sleep journeys, soundscapes, or guidance. After doing any of those to help you fall asleep, Muse will continue to track your brain through the night. And then give you your stats when you wake up in the morning. You don't have to do anything. If you find it uncomfortable and kick it off your head in the middle of the night, that's okay too. Lots of people sleep with it through the whole night. Some people just fall asleep with it for their meditations to help them fall asleep, and then they just sort of slip it off as they fall asleep. Either works well. Occasionally, Bluetooth signal will drop. That's our apologies. We're actually working on a brand new fix for the Bluetooth. So you should see improved Bluetooth signal and tracking throughout the entire night, and no more Bluetooth drops. It's a very, very, very hard technical problem, it turns out, to not get Bluetooth to drop throughout the night, but something we've been working hard on. Next question.
Next up, we have Robert.
Hey, Robert. Please unmute yourself and ask whatever you'd like. Robert, you're still on mute.
Unmute.
Welcome.
Good, thank you. So I am treated for AFib, and I use a CPAP at night to keep apnea events almost to a very low number. And yet I have more cardiac arrhythmias and things like that in the night than I do in the day when I'm walking around. And cardiologist that I see says that that's very common, that you get more of these at night than the morning. Has anyone looked at why that, I mean, not the morning, but at night versus up moving around doing your day? Has anyone ever looked at that? Or
that's not something I know about. I don't know the research on it, so I'm sorry that I can't comment on that one, but something I will look into.
And the other question I had was, so when I use the Muse at night, I typically will go into a deep sleep within about 20 minutes, very quickly. Awesome. And it'll only last for about 20 minutes. And then I go through the rest of the night, and then I'll go through a longer period right before I wake. Is that common or uncommon? Or?
That's relatively common. So you go into sleep cycles and your sleep stages all together. So that should be light sleep, deep sleep, and REM sleep, and then back up to light sleep. So those little chunks should be about 90 minutes and should happen 4 times in the night. So that's what a standard, like perfect sleep looks like. Most of us do not have perfect sleep. So you have the 4 sections, these 4 chunks that happen of light sleep, deep sleep, light sleep, REM sleep, light sleep. And then you also have a distribution of REM versus deep sleep throughout the night. So at the beginning of the night, the first half of the night, you're going to see more deep sleep cycles. And the second half of the night, you're going to see very little deep sleep and more REM cycles. So that's what and longer REM cycles. So that's what a typical good night's sleep looks like. It sounds like you're getting immediate deep sleep for 20 minutes. That sounds awesome and healthy. A typical sleep graph would see you go into deep sleep once or twice more for shorter periods in the night. And then towards the end of the night, having that replaced with REM sleep.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. My pleasure.
Okay, next up is Deborah.
Hi. We heard in our discussions earlier that we should be preparing ourselves for sleep by limiting our screen time about half an hour or more before bedtime. So my question is, why is it that some of us fall asleep actually in front of the television before bedtime?
Totally. So it's super common to fall asleep before in front of the television. It's actually one of the most common sleep aids used. The reason that it works so well is because, first of all, the television is relatively far away from you. And so the light is not as bright as your phone or your laptop right in front of your face. And second of all, it is something that we end up cueing as sleep and can bring us into the hypnagogic state. So hypnagogia is the kind of gateway to sleep. So when you first fall asleep, you might notice that you have sort of weird images happening in your mind and things are sort of like, trippy and swirly, and then you're off into sleep. That little phase there is called hypnagogia. And hypnagogia happens when your conscious mind turns off. So, you're not consciously thinking about anything. And it particularly works well when you're primed with imagery or stories. So that's why bedtime stories are great, because they let you turn off your own mind and just start to dream about whatever world is being described to you. That's why our Muse go to sleep visualizations are awesome, because if you're doing the underwater adventure or the lavender field, somebody is describing things that are intended to create imagery in your head. And when you flip from that state of cognition into imagery, you're opening the door to hypnagogia, to the gateway to sleep. And so you might notice doing the Muse go to sleep guided imagery, the go to sleep journeys, pardon me, you end up just sort of dreaming about being underwater, and then you start into your dreams, and then you don't even realize that you're sleeping. So televisions are fantastic because they create that awesome state of disengaging your conscious mind, giving you some imagery and stories to help you sleep, and they become a conditioned sleep aid for us. So anything that we do regularly that helps us fall asleep, our brain then associates that cue with sleeping. So for you or anybody else that falls asleep with the TV, you've built the cue as sleeping in the same way that a young baby might, have his bottle of milk and a story, and that becomes just bath bottle story sleep. That is what his brain learns to walk him or her into sleep. For adults, often it's learning that the television is your cue for sleep, television in your cozy bed, which is another reason why these sleep cues are another reason why Shelby Harris mentioned that if you're not sleeping well, you actually may want to be getting yourself out of bed, because you need to recondition your bed as a cue for sleep. And people with insomnia think about their beds as places for frustration and rolling around and annoyance. And what you want your brain to know is that as soon as your head hits the pillow, that's the cue for sleep. So you can build other sleep cues. You might have used the television for 10 or 15 years. It's not the best thing to be using, because there's a whole host of different kinds of content that you may not want to be loading into your brain before you sleep, and doesn't necessarily prepare you for sleep in the best way. But it's quite easy in short order to change to a new sleep cue. And that could be, doing a meditation or reading a book or whatever works. Or if you sleep awesome in front of the TV and falling asleep is great, and you have a you have something that allows it to shut off on its own half an hour after you know you're asleep, the world won't end if you keep using it. The most important thing is that you sleep well.
No, I generally use it as a cue. It's time for me to get myself to bed. And then once I'm in bed, I'm wakeful for a little while. So that's when I turn into my systematic relaxation and meditation. And then I drift off at some point.
Perfect. That
Thank
sounds
you
like an
very
awesome routine. You're so welcome.
All right, next we have Robert.
Robert, feel free to unmute yourself.
Hi.
Hey, welcome.
Hi. I've been using the original Muse headband for about a year and a half and like it. And I'm wondering, if I don't have any particular sleep issues, what would entice me to buy the headband that you can wear during the evening and analyze your sleep? Other than getting the information that it would provide, what other benefits would I get from purchasing the nighttime Muse headband?
Sure. We have 3 Muses out in the wild. One is the original Muse, which gives you real-time feedback on your brain, this classic mind meditation. Then Muse 2 has additional sensors for the heart, the breath, and the body. So in addition to getting real-time feedback on your brain during meditation, you can also get feedback on your heart, your breath, and your body movements. So we have the heart meditation, where you're listening to the beating of your heart like the beating of the drum. And what we're teaching you there is a process called interoception. Interoception is the ability to sensitively understand your internal state. And there's fascinating research studies that demonstrate that people who are higher in interoception are lower in stress because they're better able to feel or understand what's going on inside their body and then choose an intervention to help them relax. So in the heart meditation, what you're doing is you're hearing when your heart rate increases and you're hearing when your heart rate decreases. Now that increase decrease is called your sinusodal arrhythmia. And so as your heart rate increases to its top, that's with your in-breath. When your heart rate decreases, that's with your out-breath. And so what we teach you is a breathing exercise that helps you get an extended exhale that can then help you spend longer time in a decreasing heart rate. This is a lot of information, but I'm giving you all the goods here. So the difference between your highest heart rate and your lowest heart rate is your HRV, your heart rate variability. And people who have a greater HRV, greater change in their increasing heart rate versus their decreasing, highest versus lowest, are people who generally are in better health, athletes, younger people, happier people, etc. So HRV is highly correlated with basically every measure of health that you'd hope for, whether it's physical fitness or mental fitness or age. So with the Muse 2 and the Muse S, you get the exercises for brain, heart, breath, and body and information about your brain, heart, breath, and body, in addition to all of the, with Muse S, go to sleep exercises. So you have the guided sleep journeys that help you fall asleep. If you don't have trouble sleeping, that's okay. You can use them during the day for deep relaxation, and then you get insights into your sleep. And then you also get whatever else we build and release over the next year or years to come, because we're constantly innovating and building. So anybody who has the Muse S and got it initially knows that you just had first the go to sleep, then we added the sleep tracking, then we added the deep sleep insights. So you don't know not just how well you're sleeping, but actually the quality of your deep sleep, and you can start to tweak things in your life to improve your deep sleep. And we have quite a number of other interesting applications and experiences that we'll be delivering over the next 6 months and more to keep building out the experiences of Muse S.
That's great. I guess I'll just wait until the battery dies on my unit and then I'll get a new one. I'll get the sleep.
Awesome. Perfect plan.
Okay, thank you.
You're so welcome. I think we have time for one more question.
Okay, we're gonna go with Cynthia.
Oh, I'm actually noticing there's a bunch of people who want to upgrade from the original Muse to the later version. Yes, we can totally get existing users a discount code for upgrade, so you don't have to pay full price. So you can email customer care. Jess is on the line. Let's see, how can we get this to people? If we don't end up putting a discount code into the chat right now, email customercare@choosemuse.com and we can give you one, especially for you guys.
Okay, I think Cynthia's ready for her question.
Hey,
Yes.
Cynthia.
Hi there. I have the Muse S, and I also do in-person neurofeedback with neurofeedback tech. The difference with the neurofeedback tech that I'm doing is I watch a screen, and with that screen, depending on what the category is, it works different lobes of my brain. So my question is, with the Muse S, is there a way, or do you think there will be a way to target left brain as opposed to right brain to increase the activity and not maybe use the emotional brain, the frontal lobe as much?
Cool, great question. So with Muse S and Muse, any of the existing Muse products, the neurofeedback that we're giving you is specifically focused attention versus mind wandering. So we spent many years creating an algorithm and experience that specifically knows when you're in a focused attention meditation state and when your mind is wandering. And when you train this focused attention meditation state, you end up with all of the ancillary benefits of meditation, the ability to remain more focused, more in the present moment, likely an increase in cognitive function. We're currently doing a very cool study which will demonstrate those findings shortly that we'll share to you probably in about 3 months when the study's over. And it is specifically focused attention neurofeedback for meditation. We do have another company called MindLift that has created Muse as a general meditation, as a neurofeedback tool specifically for neurofeedback clinicians. And then we have another company that's built on top of Muse called OptiBrain or OptiHerence. And they use Muse for another form of neurofeedback. I believe it's hemispheric asymmetry and balancing the hemispheres. That might be of interest to you. You can look it up. I believe they should be in the App Store under OptiBrain or OptiHerence. You're welcome to also email into customer care and we can give you that information.
Right. Let's see if I have one other. Nope, that's it. Thank you.
Awesome, Cynthia. All right. This has been absolutely fantastic. It's been such an absolute joy and pleasure to just hear from all of you. And thank you, 78 of you, almost everybody, for staying all the way to the very end of this Q&A and chat. We hope to be able to have more of this kind of engagement because it's awesome to connect with everybody. And we will have additional Muse Brain Health sessions upcoming in the following months on meditation, on brain health and aging, featuring Dr. Allison Sekuler from Baycrest. She's an expert specifically in brain health and aging, and additional topics as the months go on. You can also continue on this conversation in the community. We will have a specific link that's emailed out to everybody in the community chat. And if you have any other questions or comments, you can reach out to customercare@choosemuse.com and continue the conversation in the vanilla community. So thank you to everybody. Thank you to the team for putting this together. Thank you for all of the amazing people in the audience with all of your questions. Thank you to Olav and Shelby, and wishing all of you a great day and a good night's sleep. Much love.